Good evening and salutations, my GH fans. Lulu, Brooklyn, talk about Brit. Talk about Brit being back. Am it almost felt like a sense of whiplash because there's one moment where they are updating. Well, Brooklyn said they're updating. No, I'm sorry. Lulu is that they're updating Brooklyn on the stuff that's going on in the house as far as James having a nightmare, um, Georgie, the baby, just really kind of, giving her the heads up of what's going on because, she's, they're changing shifts and everything. And then towards the end, Brooklyn's like, okay, fine, I got it. I can take it from here. And then Lulu's like, where do you think, where do you think you're going? You're not going to just dismiss me so easily. I'm like, where the f is that coming from? And then once again, she's like, well, you're responsible for Rocco being curious about Brit. And I'm like, wait, are we still bringing this back up? Like, what are we doing? But then towards the end, she's like, in a lot of ways, you kind of did me a favor because all you wound up doing was moving the timeline up. And so I'm just like, well, if that was the case, then what was with the bitchy attitude in the beginning? I don't understand that. And her concerns about her thinking that Brit is going to reject Rocco. No. You're not worried about that. What you are worried about is you are worried that you feel somehow that Rocco, aka Ben, is going to love Brit more than he loves you. And that's the same thing with Valentine. That's the same thing with Valentine. Like with her, I don't exactly remember. I think it was maybe it was Carly or it was Nina. But somebody was like, I think it was Carly, and she was like, this isn't a contest. You know? You being mad insecure, like that's not good for your damn son. Like what do you want him to do? You wanna like lock him up or whatever? Like she's already here. She's going to at some point encounter um Brit. And like she said, if I try to keep those two apart, I'm going to look like the bad guy. I'm like, then maybe you should sit there and do the trip with Charlotte when it comes to Valentine. I feel like she'll say stuff, she'll be somewhat self aware, but then she just, ugh, I don't know. I found the scene a little kind of frustrating, especially when it's like she's lying. She's not worried that Brit is going to reject her son and hurt her son. No, you're not worried about her being hurt. You're not worried about him being hurt. You're worried about you being hurt. Um. So Ava and Christina are still talking about Rick and strategizing and everything like that. And one of the things that Ava did was, just to make sure that Liz won't really ask any questions or anything like that, and also just wouldn't be cool with Rick when he gets back. See, Ava sent a message to Willow. No, or sent a hold on. What did he send a message to? I think okay. Ava's no, I'm sorry. She made it seem like Rick sent a message to Willow, and I guess must have like inboxed or invoiced something to link Nina being the one that's paying for Rick's service fees or whatever. And so at some point, and this is the part that's really messed up, right? I'm like you pretty much threw Nina under the bus by pretty much outing her as being the one that's paying for Willow's attorney fees or whatever. And Christina's like, wait, aren't y'all friends? Like, why would you do that for? But see, that's the thing with Ava. When it chips it down, Ava is about one person. Ava. Now she does sit there and say, "Oh, we went through worse or whatever, and sometimes in desperate times you have to make a deal with the devil or whatever." But what you really basically said was, if it comes down to it, I have no problems that they're selling my friend out. I have zero problems with that, and that's who Ava is. Um, Now at some point when they're having a strategy meeting, Lucas comes home. Lucas is like, what's going on here? Like, why are you here? What's going on? So he's still trying to make it seem like they're at somewhat odds or whatever. And, Ava sits there and says that, she's trying to sit there and coexist with Christina for Avery's sake. And then at that point, then he started talking about how Brit is back and how Brad could have possibly knew and was, using his so-called grief to sit there and try to get close to Lucas. Since they're saying he might have knew the whole time. But then at some point, Ava's like, well, now that Brit is back, it's only a matter of time before Brad comes back into town. And at that point, what are you going to do? Now, here's the thing I will give Ava for. In a backhanded way, Ava wound up doing Nina a favor. Yeah, she did throw her under the bus when it came towards telling Willow that Nina was the one that was paying for Rick's services, even though Willow was like, I want nothing to do with Nina. Because in this scene, here's the thing, you can push somebody only so far, even between parent and child, before at that point, yeah. And what I loved about this scene was Nina had to sit there and get real with um with Willow. When Willow was like, um, you're the one that's paying for Rick's legal fees, aren't you? And Nina was like, yeah, yeah. And she was like, listen, wow, I'm really surprised. You're not even going to sit there and try to lie about this one. Even after I told you I didn't want your help, I didn't want your involvement. I could have found the way. I could have found another lawyer. And Nina was like, no, you couldn't. You couldn't afford that. You couldn't afford Rick. And Rick was what you needed. Rick is a shark, and he's really good at his job. And that's what you needed to sit there and go up against Diane, to go up against Michael and his resources. She was like, listen, I can take the bullet of you being upset as long as you're able to sit there and keep your kids. And then while they're talking about it, Willow was like, when Rick was sitting there telling me to stay away from Drew, otherwise I won't be able to get my kids back. That was your influence, right? And he was like, yeah, because despite how many times I sit there and tell you, despite how many times everyone else has sat there and told you, you refuse to listen, and he's the one that lost your kids or whatever. Now at this point, Willow's like, you're the reason why I lost my kids. And Nina's like, no, 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 no. You are. You and your bad choices. And I'm sitting there clapping like, about fucking time. Because the one thing that Nina said was, she was like, a lot of people will sit there and tell me that I don't practically take accountability, responsibility for the things that I do. You know, always blame other people or whatever. And she's like mother, like daughter. And that sets Willow off. That sets Willow off. And what I just loved about the scene, I'm not going to go play for play, but what I loved about the scene, you know, there's one point where she's like, even if I would have sat there and told you the truth, would you have actually done anything? Would you have listened to me, or would you have sat there and said, "Oh, Drew's still a good man"? Because you're still allowing this man back into your life. And Willow's like, "Oh, well, he could sit there and get back my kids." He's like, you pretty much didn't learn a goddamn thing. Now, the difference this time, as opposed to the other time where she was just like, I'm gonna do what I want because I love Drew, this time she's like, she's using Drew to get back her kids. She doesn't love Drew, you know? She's not really too sure, but she wants to use Drew's love for her to motivate him to get back her kids. She doesn't know that, but that's her plan. So while she is giving a lot of facts and truths and everything like that, this time it's a little bit different. But again, I just love the fact that Nina finally had to sit there and get real with her and stop sitting there being her emotional punching bag and be like, hey, listen, you wouldn't have listened to me or anybody else. And this is why you're still in the second place that you're in. Now, Gio and Emma, one of the ideas that I think Emma had or Gio had was to one of the ideas was to hold up a reward to get back the dog. And at first, Emma was like, we should sit there and get Tracy, but Gio wants to sit there and get Sunny. And, he still is like, well, in the beginning, before she found out, or before I found out that I was related to her, I was cool with her, I was her friend, but now everything has changed since, we're actually blood. Now, on one hand, yes, what he said, I understand. He was like, when Tracy found out that they were family, she wanted to be family instant. When Sonny has always treated Gio like family. But like in the beginning of it, when he was like, "Nah, things are different. I don't want to do anything." I'm like, I'm part of me just like, all right, bro, this has been going on for like at least a good couple of months. Like now, this shit it's not just getting old; it's getting tired. It's getting really, really, really tired. Because it's like at some point, it's like I don't even understand why like he treats Tracy like that. You know. I mean, I don't know what his relationship with Monica's like. I'm pretty sure when her death happens, it's going to make him realize that time is a lot more short than he feels, and he's going to be there for Tracy and the family at that point. But it's like I don't want to sit there and say it's not going to be organic, but I feel like it's just going to be forced, or in some ways forced. I mean, granted, that's how it is in life sometimes, but it's like this whole thing he's been having against the Quartermains. It's just been a little bit too long. Now, at some point, they go back out and they try to find the dog again because Emma gets a call from somebody saying that they got information about the dog, and all they really had was the leash and I guess the tracker. And long story short, before I forget, Outback wound up being up in the Quartermain stables, and that's where Cody found Outback. Now, again, James had a nightmare, and he went to the stables to sit there and talk to Cody with Felicia. And, James is not there blaming himself because, the last time, Maxie said that, you practically gave me a heart attack when he fell off the roof and that they're sledding for some odd reason because, that's an idea that kids come up with. I don't know about James, but I've never came up with some dumb shit like that, but whatever. He's blaming himself. Cody's like, it's not your fault. Basically since this and you're a kid, you're gonna have adventures. And even Felicia's like, you know, I've had to sit there and worry about Maxie before, and she still does worry about Maxie. And also, Cody makes him feel better by promising that he's going to be able to ride on Comet, which is, I don't think it, I know that he wants to sit there and try to cheer him up, but he's like, well, you weren't really big enough and ready for Comet, but now I think you are. And I'm like, I think you're going to be like extra careful because he didn't grow that damn much. But it cheered him up and it worked. And I guess it was a nice moment. And then Christina comes in And Christina wants to sit there and find out where does he stand with Molly. And he tells him that Molly is like, listen, you only gonna sit there and call me for emergencies and nothing else. Like, he's just gonna sit there and respect her wishes, and he feels like nothing's gonna come of it. And of course, Christina's like, Molly's afraid of her feelings, and that's when you can tell that she still likes him. And by the way that he protests, like he's not gonna really rock her anymore, he's just gonna give her space, this, that, and the third. Christina's, can tell that, he still has feelings for her. Now Britt is hanging out in Pier 54 by herself at night, clearly not worried about being robbed or anything else. And, Jason's there. And at first, I don't know, was this like her dry sense of humor, or she has a um, high inflated, self worth or whatever. But she pretty much is like, "Are you stalking me?" No, you're not. I was like, Britt, listen, I know the dude had a thing for you, but no offense, you're not. You're not that important. Like, you're really not that special. Again, I don't know if she was joking or if she was being serious, but she kind of tells a little bit of what happened and why she's outside and why she's not with her family and stuff. And they talk about Danny and the reason why he's there because Danny found a dead body, and Britt was like, "Did Danny do it?" I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of surprised that Jason didn't sit there and get upset with that remark. And she was like, "I'm sorry, but given who his father is," I'm like, and she didn't say that, but she was like, given who he's connected to, it's like, the hell. But then when they start talking about Rocco, well, first of all, Britt reminds us again just how much of a stupid name that Rocco is, which I agree. But she wants to sit there and find out some stuff about him. And at first, Jason's like, "Why don't you sit there and talk to him yourself?" And Bill's like, "Yeah, Lulu is not gonna like let that happen." And she does sit there and own up to, like, she can't really blame their reaction towards her because she did sit there and steal somebody else's child, and that's a big deal. So she's not dumb. She understands what she did and why they're upset with her. But Jason fills her in on some of the things about Rocco, like he's thoughtful and he likes to ask questions and stuff like that. At some point they're gonna want a meeting. Oh, never mind. I was sitting there thinking, like, there's the whole previews for the week, and then there's the previews for tomorrow's episode. Anyway, long story short, Britt kind of realizes that she doesn't really have a lot of options. Brad is not in town. The motel, the cheap motel, is pretty much kind of what I think it either burnt down or something about carbon monoxide or something like that. And Jason's like, "Listen, I'm not leaving you here by yourself, so I'll give you some money for a hotel." At first I thought he was gonna be like, "Why don't you come back to the coordinates for me?" But I'm pretty sure that one went over well. It was like, I'll give you a hotel, whatever, for the night, or I'll give you a hotel. And she's like, "Oh, just for tonight." I'm like, but I gotta sit there and say, I give Jason a lot of credit because I don't know if I would have. I don't know how much patience I would have had with Britt. Hey, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know how much patience I would have had with her. But I give him a lot of credit for that. Molly and Liz. So Molly's not there asking Liz, like, have you heard from Rick or anything like that? And they talk about the digital detox, and even Molly's like, I wouldn't expect that, but I don't blame him for wanting to sit there and get away because, well, also she's happy that he's not around Ava or anything like that, and she does sit there and say that Liz is a lot better for him. And of course, at this point, Liz is like, "Listen, we're cool as friends. and he's made a lot of strides, but I think that's pretty much where that's going to end. And of course, Molly sits there and talks about the reason why Rick and Ava broke up was because of Christina and her meddling and trying to get Cody to seduce Ava into breaking those two up or whatever. But she does give her compliments, and Molly is like, "Hey, listen, even if y'all two are just friends, you are a good influence on him," which is true. And this is where Liz is like, I'm just, he did change or whatever. He's even sitting there doing um Rick's, Willow's case for free. Now, of course, that's going to wind up changing the minute that she finds out from Willow that he lied about doing it for free, whatever. He's still getting paid, and it's not the money thing that Liz would have a problem with. It's the fact that he lied and tried to make it look like, oh, I'm just doing this for altruistic reasons, like I'm a changed man or whatever, and trying to manipulate her. And that's what she's going to be pissed off about. Now, I do feel like now I'm done. now I feel like I'm done. I'm gonna sit there and try to do a live stream tonight. I'm not exactly sure what time. It's about to be like 7 o'clock, and I still got um, two more soaps to watch. And I want to sit there and try to do a review of Bold and Beautiful because I do not have time to do a review on Days of Our Lives. Plus, time has been crashing out, so I kind of want to sit there and talk about that. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go, and I will see you in the next video, and hopefully tonight's live stream.